72 what?
72 participants.
Oh my God.
Oh.
And some are double.
Hi, David.
Hi. Great to see you.
Foster. Oh my God.
David is there. George.
Hello, George.
Hey, Alvin.
Hey.
Hey, man.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Alvin. Hi,
Hi.
I'm off video, but I'm here.
Oh my God.
Ursula, hi.
David Rosenboom.
Oh.
Hello.
Larry. Oh, Larry. Oh, Thomas. There's
That's a little loud. Who was that?
Yeah.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
Hi, Joan.
Hi.
Garry Kvistad here.
Hey, Garry.
Martin, hi.
Is Martin there?
Martin is down there.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Martin Bresnik. Oh, my.
Hi, Whitney.
And let's go now to
Hi.
the next.
Mary Oaks.
Larry.
Oh, these are all people who don't have pictures. But
Matt, how do I see everybody?
Oh, so
Put it on gallery view.
yeah, give gallery view a try.
I
It's
have it
on
on
top
gallery,
right.
but it only goes up to so many people.
hey, Karen,
Oh, yeah, you have to turn pages.
turn on your video.
Which way? Oh.
On the right side, it says the number of pages, and you just click on those arrows.
Oh my God. Look at all these people.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, hello, everyone.
Hi, Russell.
Foster. Russell. Tom. My God. This is amazing.
That is amazing. Whoa.
So,
Marilyn, Chris, where's Marilyn?
Well,
She doesn't have her
she
picture.
doesn't have her picture.
Amazing. Bravo, Joan. Bravo, Joan and Matt. Thank you.
you're welcome.
So I want to point out that there's a chat, and you can chat to people individually if you want to get somebody's attention.
Oh, God.
Oh, Barbara.
Barbara, hi.
Barbara, hi.
Hi. Is Barbara seeing us?
Hi, Barbara.
Yeah, she is. Okay.
Okay.
Be better to have a joint.
Yeah. I'm sure Richard is
More appropriate.
Richard is smoking this very minute.
What is he smoking?
The usual.
The usual, yeah, the usual.
But the best.
Yes. Lucky him.
So, are we waiting for Leon?
Oh, Leon's indeed here.
He's here. Oh, where?
I'm
I didn't
here.
see him.
I'm here.
So anytime you want to start, Leon. Oh no!
I
No,
thought-
wait!
I thought
Sorry,
you were
sorry.
starting. You were
sorry.
starting.
No.
You were
The
starting with
portrait.
something.
We have a wonderful portrait by Joan Logue. It's a 1 minute long portrait. So do you want to start with that, Matt?
Is somebody
that's right.
recording this?
Yeah, I'm indeed recording
Okay,
sort
good.
of from
Just
the
wanted to be
main
sure.
base here, but it'd be a wonderful idea if a couple other people want to grab video screen grabs, just in case something gets lost, because it seems like a potentially wonderful document. So. Okay, great. And just a reminder to all, it would probably be helpful to mute when not speaking, just to avoid some runaway feedback that would be, I think, at a global scale between everybody on the call.
Oh, Ruger.
What?
Did you mute it?
No.
Yes, you did.
Andrew Cyrille. Wow.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'll start up the first presentation here. This will be a 1 minute video portrait from Joan Logue.
Sorry, it didn't fit out with the music.
Oh, was it not audible?
That's all right. Richard understands.
Thank you, Joan, for that video. Thank you very much for that. That was a great opener to have. I'm Joan Tower, and I welcome all of you. There's a lot of feedback, Matt. Matt?
Yeah, I'll keep muting a few folks here.
Oh, not everybody's muted. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. I am Joan Tower. I'm a composer, and I've been teaching at Bard for... Wait a minute. Leon's here. He should speak. I'm sorry.
No, Joan, go ahead. Well, you want you're the organizer, so why don't you can.
Well, you
keep going.
You do it. You do it. You go ahead.
You're gonna follow me?
Yeah, I'll follow you. I'll follow you.
So I want to thank Joan and everyone who's involved in organizing this, and this is awkward, but for Richard, probably very appropriate that we meet in this newfangled, otherwise not imagined format. Those of us and all of us on this screen have been operating with these platforms, and it makes you think of Richard, and it makes you think of what the intersection between technology and communication and making music in particular is all about, and what the possibilities are, and to look at it in an idealistic and optimistic way. I was privileged to be Richard's colleague. He came in the late 80s, as many of you know, to set up our electronic music program, but he was a colleague in every possible way. All of you knew Richard, and that his interests and accomplishments and capacities in music went far beyond the area for which he was famous. He helped us open the Fisher Center in producing a very major work of his, which took place in the big hall. He was a driving force at a time when we thought that experimentation and a wide-ranging sense of what kind of things we would do as musicians and to whom we would speak was considered the avant-garde, and we live in many ways horrifically conservative times, and it is with a real sense of loss that we think back on Richard and his work, and he was a terrific colleague, not only in the narrow area, as I said, which he built the program and was a terrific teacher, but he was interested in all kinds of music. He was the relative who wasn't judgmental about the things you did. And he was interested and taught many courses in the history of 20th century music. He was interested in 19th century music. He was, he didn't make a distinction. We talked about once doing a piano concerto that he had written, which was in a traditional form for orchestra and piano. And he, in the other area of intersection, he taught, he was unbelievably curious about all things and unbelievably knowledgeable, and pioneered what then was called the world music aspect of a curriculum. And his time in Japan and his unbelievably widely read sense of things was terribly useful and unbelievably knowledgeable, and carried his knowledge with a great deal of modesty and a lot of humor, with also having a sharp tongue, which I appreciated. And the one other area which I remember him over the years is his devotion to the legacy of Henry Cowell, and through him, we were able to do a lot of Cowell's music. And I was very grateful because before meeting Richard, I had, the textbook understanding of Henry Cowell and nothing more. He was a fantastic colleague, generous, modest, thoughtful, a wonderful human being, and it was terrific that he was a neighbor here in the Hudson Valley. And we're proud to have him as part of our program for all these years. And I want to thank all of you. Remembering someone is not easy. We think remembering is easy. It isn't. And I know one person on this call for the longest, probably, and that's Ursula. Where is she? And I also knew her parents and knew her when she was in college.
Yep.
I knew her when she was in college. And I hear an echo. Matt, I hear an echo of myself. Okay. Which it's painful enough to speak, but then to hear it twice is a punishment no one should suffer. In any event, when I mentioned Ursula because we were born into parents on both sides where remembrance in the face of places and people vanishing was an obsession. How to remember things that the other world, otherwise the world would not remember. And in the pandemic and in just the way of our lives, what strikes me is how easy it is to forget. And so I appreciate everyone's showing up, because what Richard believed in is also to some extent at risk, and what he worked on is at risk. And he needs to be remembered and should be remembered, and the courage of his convictions is something that we take away. So I want to thank everyone. I always fear that when we organize as head of institution, I have to do this more than I remember, organizing, events for people who've passed. You panic that no one will show up. And if it's on Zoom, it's even worse, Now, that could be a source of pride, but in the case of Richard, I'd hoped, and I'm so thrilled. I see there are 95 people, 100 people who've shown up to remember Richard. And that's probably the best way of saying thank you to him. So I want to turn back to Joan and say on behalf of all of us at Bard, we're grateful to have worked with Richard. I'm grateful to have been his colleague, and I'll miss him. And I hope we carry on the things that he believed in. So without further ado, I'll turn it back to Joan, who has shared all these years with me here at Bard. So she has much accumulated more contact with Richard, and I want to thank her again for getting this started. So, Joan.
Okay, thank you, Leon, so much. I also want to introduce Matt Sargent, who is, I would not have been able to do this without him. He's actually the guy who replaced Richard at Bard. He's running the electronic music department. He's a wonderful composer and a wonderful techno person. My limit is email and scan. He's been teaching me all. So without him, I could not have done this. He has put a lot of work into this. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. And thank you, Joan, again for that video. That was really a nice opening. It showed him, Richard, at his tasking kind of personality. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is tell you how this is going to go, the schedule. We're going to have 14 speakers coming up, and they are, just so you know who they are and in what order they are. They're people we've contacted. It's Alvin Curran, Frederic Rzewski, Carlos Zingaro, Andrew Cyrille, Barbara Mayfield, Foster Reed, William Brandt, Hiroko Sakurazawa, Ursula Oppens, Ralph Samuelson, Garry Kvistad, and a group of Bard alumni who have put in a video of 4 of them speaking. So that is the first lineup of people, and each one of them will be followed by music or a video, either a video or mostly videos, right? But some of them are talking live, some of them are talking video through the videos. And I want to thank Barbara Mayfield, Richard's first wife of 10 years, who's here and will speak. Hiroko, okay, here we go. Sakurazawa, I got that right. And David Behrman, because they were the ones that started us out on this adventure of all this whole life with Richard, and they know him better probably than anybody, those 3, between the 3 of them. So that's how we got everybody that we found out about. But there are a lot of people we have missed too, and they'll probably be in the open mic. There's an open mic situation after the scheduled speakers come. So that's the first thing I need to tell you. Second, this is really a celebration of Richard. It's the kind of memorial that you want to do for people. Look at how many people showed up for him with this. This is just amazing tribute to somebody who gave so much musically, personally, every way. And I think it's a celebration of him, and I'm just looking so forward to the whole thing, because there's so many wonderful people here. I know a lot of you, and it's just wonderful. And we have a surprise, which is a person who's going to host this thing. He's somebody who knows you. I can't do this because I'm in the traditional classical field. Sorry. So we decided to get somebody who knows you all, and he knows you all. And it's the iconic George Lewis. So let's welcome George Lewis.
Am I echoing? Okay. Well, thanks. That's really cool. I'm supposed to moderate, and so that means I'd like you all, those of you who are speaking or plan to speak, to be moderate in your. We budgeted very carefully the amount of time that people can speak, because we know there are people here who know Richard very well. Any one of us could give an extensive disquisition on his life, his work, his personality, all these amazing things he's done. I'm tempted to unburden myself for a couple of minutes myself, but you can see if I actually hold to my own suggestions for you, that 4 to 5 minutes for the speakers would be great. And if I send you something in the chat, there's the chat line. If I send something in, that probably means that I'd like you to consider wrapping up so that the next person can come in. Richard was a master of that sort of thing, because that sort of thing is improvised, and Richard was, of course, a master improviser. And for me, he was a crucially important mentor. And I just remember the very first memory I have of meeting Richard was with Barbara. We were in some apartment in New York, and he had the synthesizer in his apartment, and I told him some crazy thing that I thought he should do. I didn't know anything, and he did it, and it was crazy, but it was like, you know, it's like he's a generous mentor through my whole life, really. Generous, and people here, this is an amazing community. I don't, people who I think I had no idea who these people were, who any of you were, if it wasn't for Richard bringing all of us together, and we're just representatives of a really much larger worldwide community that he brought together with his music, his personality, his interest in justice and fairness, you know, his intercultural music making, you know, the world band. I was looking at that book from the 70s, you know, the research into his mystical and Jewish heritage, which we're going to be seeing near the end, you know, his internationalist cosmopolitan bent, his research into unconscious mind, multiple pianos, braidwave music, and the incredible experience of playing with him, which is just unforgettable because he translated all of that into sound. And, you know, I would say he brought soul to the synthesizer. That's what I would say as a start. So there's a lot more I could say, and you could see, but a lot of it is in my background, you know. The two great mentors of mine, David Behrman and Richard Teitelbaum, and I, you know, thank the stars every day for having met them. So with that, I think we're going to hear some music, you know, because it's, I don't know, this is more emotional talking about Richard than I thought. So you should start the music now. just letting that float in the air for a minute. Yeah, the three virtuosi of bending space-time, Alvin, Frederic, and Richard. And my goodness, I heard, especially in around this time, 2017. Well, I don't want to go any further into this. Let's just hear from Alvin right now.
Hi.
Alvin Curran.
Just to say how honored, moved to be here with all of you. It's just an amazing experience. Very much like the old days when something like this could almost happen, that we're all in the same room at the same time. And I was particularly touched not to see all these wonderful faces and friends that have been in my life for so long, and see you all together on this occasion, in spite of the occasions being an occasion. I just calculated mentally that I had known Richard, still know Richard, lived with him every day practically, but had a very vital and remarkable relation for over 60 years. And when something like that happens, you take someone for granted. And as soon as Richard wasn't there anymore, there has been a gigantic hole in my life that I'm still trying to cope with. At the time of Richard's death, just afterwards, I was asked by the editors of the German music magazine Musiktexte in Cologne to write something on Richard, as was Frederic. And I normally wouldn't read anything like this because this is not an occasion to read something. But since it was the most spontaneous piece of writing, very, very short, I'm going to read this and then just play a couple of tones on a couple of conch shells, and that's it. This is what I wrote. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabah. These are the sounds of the initial Hebrew words for the Kaddish, the prayer for the dead, which I offer in memory of my dear friend and musical colleague, Richard Teitelbaum, who died on April 9th in Kingston, New York, after a severe stroke. His music and life were from early on suffused with the spirit of all the gods, which enabled him as an adult atheist to make music anywhere, with anyone, and with blissful ease, because as he understood it, music belonged to everyone. It was a natural human right. Whether he played Mozart or Musica Electronica Viva, shakuhachi or gamelan, improvised with the masters of post-free jazz like Braxton, George Lewis, Leroy Jenkins, Waddell, Leo Smith, Roscoe Mitchell, Andrew Cyrille, Jimmy Garrison, and Steve Lacy, or made music for golems, brainwaves, the early Moog synthesizer, or mechanical controlled pianos with the Vorsätze. It didn't matter. When Richard rolled out of bed and got to the gig, and he was one of the slowest individuals I have ever known, he was, musically speaking, way ahead of the curve. In his self-effacing way, a real pioneer. Unlike Frederic Rzewski and myself, his MEV partners in sonic crime since 1965, who continued to compose notes on paper, Teitelbaum early on, and wisely, moved primarily into domains of spontaneous music, analog and digital electronics, and sound art, leaving the noble tradition of composition largely behind him. But when asked his profession, Richard would reply, composer. In fact, he was one of the best composers I've ever improvised with, and our common history has produced hundreds of hours of music to support this statement. His works ranged from conceptual pieces to opera, to attempting to dialogue with near inaudible sounds, the very edges of sound, to unleashing multiple automated pianos at cosmic speeds as if they were running from a nest of COVID-spitting snakes, to writing languorous monophonic melodies, to evoking the tragic comic medieval myths of the European shtetl in seemingly metaphysical vocal improvisations. Like many Americans of our generation, he was blessed with having the liberty to make original experimental music inside or outside the conventional new music worlds. Yes, the group Musica Elettronica Viva became both a home and a safe house for Richard for nearly 60 years. But his work as inspiring teacher at Bard College, curator of the estate of Henry Cowell, and performer around the world took place in his own artistic space. Among Richard's prime accomplishments was the creation of the World Band in 1970, long before the term world music existed, and an ensemble that included masters of jazz, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Western acoustic and electronic musics. This project was not some hippie dream, but a genuine coming together of musicians from the world's major musical traditions to see what might happen, just what might happen, in case they were looking for pure joy. Richard, colorblind, became an admirable builder of bridges between the predominantly white new music culture and the post-jazz informed Afro-American worlds. In his amiable, laid-back way, was loved by both. Nono scholar and new music producer Veniero Rizzardi writes of Richard, and I'll read this in Italian and then translate it for you. Bisogna parlare di lui adesso, raccontarlo perché lui era molto troppo schivo ed è stato più importante di quanto lui voleva far credere. It's about time to talk about Richard, tell his story, because he was much too withdrawn, too shy, and he was far more important than he wished people to believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Susan. Everything's
Hi,
okay over
hi,
there?
George. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Great to see everyone. That that video reminded me of watching you guys play in both Vancouver and National Sawdust within three of you. I mean, you were being industrial, Alvin, Frederic was being pastoral, and Richard was being subterranean. And at a certain point, in the midst of a very quiet passage, Frederic said in a very wonderfully evocative voice, "Please God, please Lord, let me not become a robot." I thought that might be an interesting introduction to Frederic. Maybe he won't like it. I don't see him. Is he here?
We have a video contribution from Frederic, but I wasn't sure if he was also going to speak live.
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll put the video on. He talks quite a bit in the video as well.
Okay.
The video is 8 minutes. It's supposed to be 4.
There's 100 people now.
What's that?
There's 100 people signed
Is
on.
it playing? Okay.
Well, first of all, I would like to introduce my son, Noam, who is recording and making this video. Now, okay, I don't want to talk much. This is like the worst thing a pianist can do. You can go. The worst thing a pianist can do is come out and say he's not going to play well. No, you never do this. You always pretend that something is what it is not, disguising your mistakes with mopping the brow or whatever. Okay, but I have to say this because this piece is brand new. In fact, it's not even finished, and I shouldn't really be doing this. It's part of a series called Friendship, which was inspired by Ursula Oppens. And this is number 4 in the series, and it's dedicated to Richard Teitelbaum, who was my longtime friend. So the reason I'm not playing well is because, well, it's not even finished, this piece, so I'm making changes all the time. So you can't really practice something that you're changing all the time. It's not there yet. Now, why is that? It's because you like something, but you also don't like it. It's I guess what was Freud meant by the ambivalence of primal relationships. So you like something, but you also don't like it. So you change it, but it makes it very hard to practice it because it's not there yet. So that's all. And the only thing I want to say, well, I mean, I don't want to talk too much. So Richard, Alvin, and I were part of a generation of people. Okay, I don't want to talk about it, but the reason is because the last movement, there are 3 movements in this piece, and the last movement, the third, is based on a famous nigun. A nigun is a song without words, a form of prayer in the Hasidic tradition. So this famous nigun is called the Nigun Shamil, and the last part of it is based on it. Yeah, Richard always, none of us were religious, but Richard often had references to Jewish mysticism and so on in his work. So this too is a reference to that. I think that's enough. So I'll just play.
remember there was some like super perverse right after that program started, and there was like for a minute.
Wow. Thank you, Frederic. Wow. Wow. You know, we can hear next from another longtime collaborator with Richard, the violinist, electronic musician, visual artist, descendant of Magellan, Carlos Zingaro. Can you unmute there, Carlos? We can hear you. Yeah, is he on yet? I just saw him.
Oh yeah, I did see his name there.
No, I saw his face. He grew a cool new beard. So what happened? Maybe he went off.
Oh, I think he's there. I wonder if he can hear
him?
us. Let me type to him.
Please do.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, George. The name mentioned is my family name and not my nickname, which is Zingaro. And I just have to say that Richard for me was a friend, a brother, a collaborator, and a master. And one of the few people playing the electronics which did play the electronics and synthesizer such as an acoustic instrument. And the first time we met back in 1978, thanks to Steve Lacey that told me that I should meet this guy when I was going to New York. And then finally, we began collaborating in 1979 when I was, and I met George as well there. Are you getting me?
Yes, we are.
And at Creative Music Foundation. And that's when I began collaborating steadily with Richard, and it was impressive. I don't believe in miracles, but musically, it was a kind of miracle that first getting together and playing like a friend of ours was listening, and he asked, come on, it's not possible for you to be the first time you are playing together. But it was like a connection, immediate connection. So thank you, Richard. I miss you.
Well, at the moment, I think we're going to have an excerpt from the duo from 1997.
Yeah, we did it in Buenos Aires.
Wow. I think that next on the schedule, there's, thank you, Carlos. Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
And we'll
Thank
hear
you.
more later from you, another collaboration I put in the chat between you and Richard, the one in Korea.
Okay.
But I think next on the schedule, according to this, is one of the earliest recordings I ever heard of Anthony Braxton and Richard Teitelbaum called Crossings. Is that going to be played as part of that?
Yeah, that's right. It's a 5-minute excerpt from Crossings.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Braxton introduced me to Richard Teitelbaum, you know, so I have him to thank as well for being a part of Richard's life, for him being a part of mine. Well, there you are, soul of the synthesizer. That's the classic Moog, right? I mean, that's what that was, right? No digital anything, just, you know. Wow. So next week we'll hear from another longtime collaborator with Richard, master drummer, Andrew Cyrille. Is he on? He was on there.
I think he's on. Yeah. Andrew, can you hear us?
Andrew,
I can hear you.
Great. Talk to us. Yeah. Glad to see you.
Like so, George. So, I'd just like to say good afternoon to everyone. And in a way, though this is a celebration, is also a very somber occasion due to the fact that my buddy, Richard Teitelbaum, has passed away. And when I heard that, it brought tears to my eyes, literally. And I say this about Richard being my buddy because sometimes we'd get on the telephone and just have a good time gossiping about people and different things. And we'd have a grand time, you know, just talking, you know, about life. So I'm going to just say a few things about my collaborations with Richard over the years in the music situation. I met Richard was actually on a recording that Leroy Jenkins was the leader of, called Space Mines and New World, The Survival of America on Tomato Records. And on that date was George Lewis, Anthony Davis, Richard, and myself. And, you know, it was a terrific recording. I had actually never played with anybody who played synthesizer, electronic music. So I played what I heard in relationship to what Leroy wanted us to do, him being the composer. And, you know, if you ever have an opportunity, those of you who haven't heard it, check it out. It's a beautiful record on Tomato. It was done back in 1978. Then the next opportunity that I had to play with Richard, I mean, I remember that occasion playing with him and the synthesizer electronically. And me playing just my drums acoustically. What I would do is I would just hear where he went, he would hear where I would go, and we would just collaborate with each other. It was just like having a conversation in sound. Sometimes I think of paintings, a sound painting, and all of the colors that we could get from our different instruments. You know, of course, I can get all kinds of different textures from a drum set, the cymbals, how I hit the cymbals, how I use the sticks, where I place the sticks on the heads, etc. The kind of strokes that I use. And at the same time too, you know, it's a feeling. So you get the feeling of where the person is going, and then you go there with him. And that's what Richard and I did together. So we did this recording double clutch up at a venue called Soundscape, which was put together by Verna Gillis. Verna Gillis happened to be she was a a person who did a lot of recording of different musicians around the world. So she had this loft space called Soundscape. And I decided that I'd like to do a duet with Richard at Soundscape. So Verna said, fine. So Rich and I got together. We didn't have any rehearsals or anything. He set up his Moog synthesizer at the time. And, you know, I had my drum set. And we just decided to begin to play. And we must have played for about 2 hours. So after we did the recording, we decided that perhaps we could sell what we had played. Maybe somebody would be interested in it. So he and I got together and we took excerpts out of that just about 2 hours of music that we played. And then we gave titles to each distinct piece of music within the context of that whole that we thought could be titled. So he and I sat down and said, okay, well, you know, we could call this Sliding on a Bubble, or, you know, we could call this Double Clutch. So what we did was we did that. We gave it a number of different titles. And then we decided perhaps we could contact somebody. So I knew this guy named Lars Sundström, who had this recording company in Switzerland. And Lars, the name of the record company was called Silkhart. So we sent the tapes that we had, that is the tapes the tape that Richard and I had with the excerpts, with the compositions to Lars. He liked it. And then he put out this recording called Double Clutch. And it's one of my favorite recordings. You know, when I listen to it, it just takes me to so many different places. And every time, you know, I hear it, I hear something different, even though it was done way back in about the early 1980s. See. So then after that, I remember going to Germany, and I knew Richard was in West Germany at that time. West Germany, West Berlin was in East Germany, let me put it that way. And I remember going to this loft that he had. It was a huge space. And he must have had about 3 or 4 pianos in that space. And he told me that he was doing some electronic coordination with all of the pianos. See, so I guess he'd do something on one with the synthesizer, or at least with his electronic invention. And then he would do something with another. And I just sat there and listened, and I was really amazed. And that was really an exciting and an extraordinary time for me, being in West Berlin in East Germany. And again, you know, Richard and I had a good time, just being with each other and listening and talking about the music and what he was doing. Then not too long after that, we decided to do some more work together. So there was an invitation, and I think Richard got the gig, and he asked me to do something with him in Italy. So we did a concert. I don't know if it was in Pistoia. It could have been Pistoia, Italy. And at the same time, Braxton was there, and we did this trio, the duo with me and Richard, and then we did a trio with Anthony. And then not long after that, Richard and I went to Greece. And Anthony was there and we did a trio. Now, Richard and I stayed, Anthony had to leave. And I'll tell you a funny story. Well, it was not really a story, it was really true. Richard and I were taking a trip on a ferry boat from Athens to like Thessaloniki, just hanging out. So we're sitting down, you know, talking to each other. And then all of a sudden, Richard pulls out this joint. So he looks at me and says, "You want some of this?" I said, "What? Are you kidding? Here, you and me sitting together, and me being an African American sitting in a boat with you, you know, and everybody on the boat was white. So of course, you know, I was outstanding to some degree. So, you know, they had to be looking. So I said, no. I ain't getting into this because I'm not going to go to jail here in Greece because I didn't know who was on that boat. So anyway, he just looked at me and said, okay. So I got up and I walked away. And that was just something that I will always remember, you know, as being with Richard, Richard being who Richard was. And he was loose that way. And very often too, you know, that's the way the music came out. It came out loose and it was tight. And we had a good time being together. Then after that, I think we had some more gigs. We went from Greece. We had a gig in Munich. We played in Munich, Germany together. Then we also played in Cologne, Germany together, doing these duets. And again, I would play, he would play, and there was never any kind of a tension insofar as what we did. If it was any tension, it was tension in the music, and then we released it, you see. And, you know, I have also a way of thinking about playing, which means that sometimes, you know, you can have a prescription, and to me, that means written music, and you read the music and you play it, which is good. And then sometimes you have an opportunity just to play music that doesn't have a prescription, and you just hear each other and you have a conversation and you go with where the music goes. And that's what Richard and I would always do. Then I remember not too long after that, we came back to New York, and then there was Roulette, the old Roulette, down on West Broadway. And that was run by a gentleman named Jim Staley. And I asked Jim, you know, could I do a concert there with Richard, Mia Masaoka, and Frank Lowe, the saxophonist, tenor saxophonist. And we played there. I think we played 2 sets. If it wasn't 2 sets, it was 2 nights, at least 2 sets per night. And there are tapes of that concert, and Jim has them, you know, in his archives. Maybe one day they could be released by somebody, and, you know, we could hear what we did on that occasion. Then, not long after that, I did another concert with Richard. It was a duet at the Symphony Space in New York City. I think the Symphony Space is located on 92nd Street or something like that in the city. And again, we had a good time just getting together and just playing the music. See? Then, not long after that, I had another opportunity to do something for Roulette again, which had then moved to Brooklyn. And so I thought to myself, I says, well, maybe we could do a trio. So then I thought of, again, Richard, myself, and then I got Elliot Sharp, the other guitar synthesizer player. And we got together and played. And that was a great concert also. That music is also taped. And I think Jim Staley has that in his archives. Maybe one day that could be released and we could listen to that. Then not long ago, this century, Richard and I and Ben Monder and Ben Street went to Portugal. And we did a concert in Portugal. It was Guimarães, Portugal. And then we went from there and we went to Zurich, Switzerland. And we did a concert in Zurich. It's a concert that they do every year during the winter. And it's not, it's Willisau. It was the Willisau Festival. So we went there and we played. And again, we had a good time. Then finally, a couple of years back, it had to be 2018, I think, I was offered a recording for ECM, and Richard wanted to record for Manfred Eicher, ECM, and Manfred wanted Richard to record. So I got the date, and again, with Richard, Bill Frisell, guitarist, Ben Street, and myself, we did this recording called Declaration of Musical Independence. And everybody made a musical contribution, a composition to the piece. Richard contributed a piece called Herky Jerky. You should hear it. And he plays piano. And it was just piano that he played on it. He didn't play any synthesizer on that particular piece. And it's very interesting. Now, he had written music for that, so he gave us written music. So we had to read the music and play what he had prescribed, so to speak, wanted us to play. And we improvised within, the composition, as most jazz musicians do. We get a theme and then we improvise on it, and usually then take the theme out. So it was like an ABA format arrangement. And it's a good piece. So if you ever get the Declaration of Musical Independence, check it out, Richard's piece. And then we were going to do another recording for ECM. And again, going to the Village Vanguard, because we had played the Village Vanguard when we had done the Declaration of Musical Independence. And interestingly enough, Richard had never been in the Vanguard before. As long as the Vanguard has been in existence and Richard had been in existence, he had never gone to the Vanguard. So it was really a pleasure, for him to be able to play down at the Village Vanguard with all of those great jazz musicians, stars, and other people, who were not necessarily jazz musicians, like Barbra Streisand and Leadbelly and people like that, had played on the stage there. And he was just very excited. And Deborah Gordon was very, very pleased, to have him there. And, we did 6 nights. So then I got another offer to play at the Vanguard. It was last year. And so Richard at first said that he wanted to make the gig, he wanted to do it. And then we were going to do a recording, for the ECM after that. But then when I talked to him, he told me that he wasn't doing very well and he was having a problem with his heart. So he said that for him to travel to and from New York City up to Bearsville, where he lived, would have been a little too much for him. And then of course, too, the Vanguard is subterranean. So you go down in the basement, so to speak, it's underground. And then they have some long steps that you have to go up and down. So he said that he thought that would be a little bit too much, for his health. So then he decided that he couldn't make the gig. And I understood that. So, we talked on the telephone for a while. And that was the last time I spoke to him, and it was terrible because not long after I had spoken to him about the Vanguard gig, Hiroko called me and told me that, he was ill, and then, he had passed away. And to me, it's a great loss, because not only was he, a great musician, and he told me about a lot of you people whom I had never seen until today over Zoom. I had heard your names. Some of you, I had seen before. But he talked about all of you. He'd mentioned you in our conversations, etc. And, I learned a lot from him. So, again, wherever you are, Richard, I love you. And perhaps, who knows, maybe we'll meet again somewhere and play some more music. So thank everybody here. I thank everybody for listening. And hey, we're on Zoom, and it's different, but we're all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks a lot. Richard, I don't know when we were in Rome together. We were in Rome together 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, are some of you experiencing this? All the days, all the years are starting to bunch up, 68 years old, this stuff is happening, Any event, so he took me on a tour of Rome. He would point to a building here, and he'd talk about what was happening here, what they did back then. Then he pointed to one building, and he started talking about Barbara Mayfield for a pretty long time, because, and I didn't know really that long history that went back to Rome and before, and I just knew a slice of it. So, being married and also being a lifelong friend, so that was my introduction for you, Barbara. There you go. So please.
Well, I like the fact that you have the BLT group behind you there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I prepared some notes because I didn't know who would be talking about what, and I would fill in on some things. So anyway, let me. Okay. I first, let's see, where did I run into Richard and how did all this start? Anyway, I was living in Cologne, Germany with Alan Bryant, who was also an early MEV participant. And we decided to go to Rome on our way back to the United States. So we piled all our belongings in a Volkswagen van and went down first to Venice, where Bob Ashley and Milton Cohen had been invited to do one of their elaborate film installations. I don't know if it was part of the Biennale, it might have been. Anyway, and Richard was down there because he was studying probably with No in Venice. And we all hung out all the time after the performances in the tent that Milton had set up. And let's see. So then when Alan and I got to Rome, we didn't have any place to stay. So I think John Eaton got us a room at this place on Piazza Biscione, which was looking over the Campo dei Fiori, and it was so beautiful there. we just both fell in love with Rome at that point. I don't know if you know that square where the statue of Giordano Bruno is, and it's kind of a flower market and a vegetable market in the daytime. Anyway, and I had met Frederic earlier when we were living in Cologne. Frederic came by, and he had been an old friend of David Behrman. So we looked up Frederic and met Alvin through Frederic, Alvin Curran, that is. And the murky beginnings of Musica Electronica Viva are really something, in that they we're all kind of confused about what the actual first concert was. And I think I'll put my 2 cents in. I think it was at St. Paul de Vence. Frederic, as you probably know, was one of the premier pianists of the avant-garde in Europe and the United States, premiering such as Stockhausen's Klavierstück 10 and other notable works. And he, oh dear, I have a frog in my throat. So Frederic was also very active in Rome, performing with Novo Consonanza, which was another group of improvisational musicians. And we met, I guess, John fed a place through that, who was living in Florence, I believe, at that time. And let's see, so I think Frederic, because he was so popular, was getting all these gigs offers. And so he decided he was more interested in taking some of his new friends around Europe rather than doing the old shtick of Stockhausen and whatever. So we all piled in Alan's van and went up to St. Paul de Vence and performed there. Not to great success, but it's been a wonderful performing space. I mean, Cecil Taylor and I don't know who all had all visited in St. Paul. So here is the early group of MEV. Is that in focus? Drawn by a wonderful collage that you can look on Alvin Curran's site and see in more focus. But Edith Schloss was the old girlfriend of Alvin. And here she is. She had a dog. And here's Richard over here with his shock of red hair. And Alvin and me and Frederic and Nicole and Ivan van Dor, who became an ethnomusicologist after. He's an interesting person. He did a lot of film scores as well. And there's John fed a place. And here's Alvin Curran. And here is Carol Plantamura. And here is Iko and Alexis Rzewski. So that was the first group, I believe. And then it was such an interesting time that we started performing all over Europe, and it was really fun. I had some, Nicole and I were working, and Nicole and rather Edith was painting, so we couldn't join all the performances, but we did what we could. And other people also were interested in MEV and performing with MEV, because Frederic liked to say that musicians and non-musicians should all throw their sound in the sound pool. And so I remember that there were 18 people we paid at one point in that one concert in Amougy. But I think that was the largest MEV ever was. And then finally it was distilled down to Frederic and Alvin and Richard, which was a wonderful trio. And let's see, so let's take up with, and then we had a tour finally of the United States, and the Europeans like the Poiquets and the Yvonne and all didn't want to come because they thought we would just abandon them in the United States, and they would really, it would be financially disastrous for them. So we had this tour that was laid out. Frederic hired Marianne Amachet and Anthony Braxton because he was spending more time in the United States and gotten to know the music scene in New York, etc. And so that was quite a tour. Marianne adding her sound, and Anthony being what Anthony is, a wonderful musician. And so we went, and Richard at this time decided he wanted to be an ethnomusicologist, or at least learn about different world musics. I had a really good Indian music collection because I was a friend of Shirish Kaur, who was the tambura player that played with Ravi Shankar, and he was a student of Ali Akbar Khan, and etc. So he had helped me assemble this record collection on vinyl. So Richard and everyone else enjoyed it. And so Richard signed up for his PhD at Wesleyan, PhD studies, and we met people like met people like Russell Hartenberger and Bob from Nexus at that point, as well as other people who were studying world music, as it was called then. And Richard immediately decided to organize a band called World Band that someone else mentioned earlier. I guess it was Alvin, but it was wonderful. I was actually the liaison between the world musicians and Wesleyan University, and those were tumultuous times at the end of the 60s. And so I had to negotiate housing and salaries, and nobody had a secure job there at Wesleyan. Nobody had tenure who was from the world community. So anyway, especially Cho Chae-son, who was a taegum player from Korea and a national treasure, and Lakshmi Shankar, L. Shankar, who is a noted violinist, plays the Indian violin. And Jimmy Garrison was part of the band, and some other musicians from Wesleyan were fantastic, but they only had one performance, I think, and that was it. And I'm not sure if there's even a good recording of it. And so then Richard continued to have problems with his negotiation for presenting a PhD thesis. He got them to agree that he would have it on video, which was just the Porta Packs were just out. And, but I don't think he ever finished it. But so much for that, but he continued to have an academic career after that, which was really fascinating. He started off at Cal Arts, and then he was hired by the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and then York University, all of which were interesting centers. Cal Arts, of course, we all know about. The Disney School, which was a little ironic considering that Richard's father was a Disney lawyer. And the Disneys founded Cal Arts as sort of a training ground for future employees like animators and film experts. But somehow they were advised to hire the Brandeis faculty, which was very left-leaning, shall we say. And so they soon had a little difficulty with that. And I think it was when everyone was swimming nude in the Cal Arts swimming pool in the old campus, and the Disneys came by and said, "We will not have communists on the faculty." And anyway, we lived in sort of a commune situation in the middle of a beautiful orange grove with Peter Van Riper and Allison Knowles in one house, and Simone Forti and Joseph Bogdanovich and Richard and I in the other house. And then later on, Namjoon Paik decided to go leave Cal Arts and left his engineer Shuya Abe there and appointed me in charge of Shuya Abe. So he had a little trailer out in the middle of the orange groves, and that was fun. Every day was sort of fun at Cal Arts, I must say. And then we went on to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which was quite amazing to be dropped into Chicago. The school itself was noted for film studies, and Stan Brakhage used to give a wonderful series of lectures on different films and show. That's where Bill Brand was, I believe he's on the program next, was Richard's teaching assistant, and also made wonderful films himself. I think we're going to be treated to one of them. And Richard had an old friend, John Smith, who taught at the religion department of the University of Chicago. So we went down there a lot, and actually hooked up with the AACM people on the South Side and went to a lot of their performances or talks or whatever was going on there. And let's see, and then after Chicago came York University in Toronto. And that's where we were, Richard had become interested in communicating through brain waves and syncing up with people's not only thoughts, but just, it was almost a spiritual quest for Richard to communicate that way with friends and etc. This was before brainwaves became in every psychiatrist's office as feedback for therapy. But anyway, he had taken a year off from Rome to go and study at Queen's College with the sleep program out there, and studied how brain waves work and how they come out in sleep and how you do come in. and it was beautiful what he did. And he got Robert Moog, the synthesizer man, to build him a brainwave amplifier, which Hiroko has found and we've identified. And that was, so when Richard brought it back to Rome, we started experimenting. Steve Lacey and Irena did a performance, I mean, at one of the pharmaceutical companies of Switzerland, I think. And Richard and I did a lot of performances of brainwaves as part of the MEV performances when we toured. I thought maybe David Rosenblum is going to be on. I don't know, maybe in the category. Anyway, he had the Aesthetics Research Center in Canada, and was very interested also in brain waves, and we did a lot of experiments there. I was interested in Tai Chi, and I hooked up a lot of people and listened to their brain waves and what they did. And there's David had, Rosenblum had published a book on this, if anybody's interested in it. But then finally, Richard got tired of brainwaves when they became so widespread in the, etc. And he and Serge Tcherepnin, another inventor of synthesizers, did a piece where a pan of beans were jumped in New York from CalArts in California. I think I'm going from one thing to another. Richard was so prolific at this point, it's hard to organize everything. And that was part of Charlotte Moorman's festival. And later, Namjoon had Richard hook up John Cage for his brainwaves because we wanted to discover what was in his mind. And I don't know, about this time, I think I felt like I was in a Josef von Sternberg movie, Morocco. Did you ever see that? Where Marlene Dietrich, the lead, finally follows, was it Gary Cooper or someone, who's joined the Foreign Legion, and she's the camp follower behind it. So we came back to New York, and Richard was always very sensitive to sound, extremely so. So he would have a concert going on in the house. In the kitchen, for instance, he would be humming with the refrigerator and animating everything that was making sound in the loft, as well as maybe a few sirens coming out of the street and all. And decided that New York was really too much for him. It was too noisy, and he still had that all the time, even when his hearing was deteriorating. But he went up to Woodstock, and he was really happy up there. I'm not sure if Anthony was still up there at that point, but there was a whole community, including Carl Berger and all. And so that was lovely. And then, so Richard and I had split up, and Mimi Johnson asked me if I wanted to join her. I was working for Global Village in New York, and they were driving me crazy. So she offered me a job at Performing Arts Services. And then I worked there for a long time. And then she asked me if I would mind if they took on Richard. And I said I didn't. So I managed his career for a while before going into television myself as a producer. And that's why this lovely picture is behind you of BLT, which we also managed, but I don't think, you ever have a gig? I'm not sure.
It was a virtual band. we were friends.
ahead of its time, as usual. So I think that's all I'll say now, but anyway, I think we all miss Richard.
Yeah, we do. So you were talking about Richard's wanting to become an ethnomusicologist, and you know that the whole world band era. And Foster Reed, who we'll hear from next, produced through his recording company one of the signal recordings from that era. The piece blends with Katsuo Yokoyama and Shakuhachi. And I tried to find my live video with them playing this piece in Seattle, but I'm in Berlin and the hard drive is not here apparently. So, but you should definitely hear, maybe we'll hear from Foster about that and whatever else he wants to talk about.
Let's see. I see Foster's on the call.
Are you on, Foster? Maybe you can unmute or something. You see him?
Yeah, he just hi.
Hey.
Hey, everybody. It's very touching to see everybody here. This is one of the largest new music audiences I've ever been to. It's incredible. And it's very nice to see the Teitelbaum family, and you know, this whole group is really touching. So I met Richard in the context of meeting Alvino Curran, the noted Italian composer, and Ursula Oppens and Fred Rzewski, and Ivar Mikashov. It was all a kind of a group that seemed to know each other and have, you know, lived, loved, and lost for decades before I even met them. So there was an extraordinary bunch of people. And so we began talking about making a record. It became clear that it was going to be a kind of very intellectual world music experience. And I was pretty excited by it. And there was a concert in Seattle that we were hoping that was going to become the record, but something happened to the tape and it wasn't acceptable. So we kind of gave up. Time passed. Maybe 10 years later, the record we did release came together. Then, you know, more or less the internet ate the music industry. And then I moved to the Hudson Valley and got to know Richard and Hiroko locally. And we had a festival, and then there was a few more performances with Ralph Samuelson. And in one of those performances tended to be a kind of post-war Japanese existential statement of extraordinary kind of intellectual fervor, the thicket of deep understanding. But at one of these performances, instead of that happening, it just turned out to be absolutely lyrical and rapturous music that nobody could really say anything afterwards. And then finally we said, well, Richard, what was that? And he said, I don't know, it just sometimes happens that way. So that was kind of one thing that I wanted to bring to this, is that, you know, in addition to all the brainwave stuff, that Richard was a lyrical musician behind all of that. And that's when I had to think of what would I think of about Richard, that's what I remember best. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Foster. I think at this point we're going to be experiencing a video compilation by Bill Brand, and also including other videos from Dia Beacon with David Behrman, Miguel Frasconi, and Marina Rosenfeld, as well as videos. And so I don't know what's on the videos. I haven't seen it. So I'm assuming is that right, Matt? Is that what's next?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a 1-minute excerpt of a William Brand video that it was a film piece done by William Brand and Richard in 1973. And then we'll move over to some video statements by David Behrman and Miguel Frasconi, along with a performance featuring the two of them, along with Marina Rosenfeld, and Richard with the Merce Cunningham Company at Dia Beacon. So we'll have a few videos in a row. It's about a 8 to 10 minute run of a few videos mixed together.
And then after that, we'll have the last group of people speaking about Richard before we move to the open mic section.
That's correct.
Richard and I were New York City kids. Looking back on our childhoods, I think we took our circumstances somewhat for granted back then. How did we meet? Our parents sent us to a summer music camp, a leftist paradise, Indian Hill music camp for talented teenagers, in the Berkshires near Tanglewood, summer 1953. Richard, writing this, I can't believe you're gone now. That camp was run by Mordecai Bauman and his wife, Irma. Morty was a singer with a strong, beautiful baritone voice. He sang different things, but especially loved leftist protest songs. You can hear him singing some of those songs today on YouTube. He had toured the US with Hans Eisler when Eisler was briefly in this country after World War II. Henry Cowell was usually part of the faculty at Indian Hill, but that summer when Richard and I met, he was replaced by Wallingford Rieger. Rieger was a fine and original composer and a free spirit. Also a communist, which meant that during those witch-hunting years, he couldn't get a university job or have his fine orchestra pieces played. Thanks to Rieger, we teenagers learned about Charles Ives and Henry Cowell and Carl Ruggles and John Cage and Edgar Varese. Don't remember Rieger mentioning Ruth Crawford Seeger. In those days, composing was supposed to be a boys' club activity. Pete Seeger. He wasn't on the faculty, but he was a friend of Morty's and Irma's. He came often to visit Indian Hill, and he sang for us. Kisses Sweeter Than Wine. If I Had a Hammer. What a wonderful artist he was. Unforgettable. That Indian Hill experience for Richard and me pointed both of us in a more radical and more left-leaning direction than we might have gone in otherwise. Now we were friends. Richard lived on the west side near the Museum of Natural History. I lived on the east side near the Guggenheim Museum. I used to bicycle over to his apartment building. He would get his bike and join me. We would cycle to the Hudson River. One time, on the night before Thanksgiving, we watched together as the balloons of the Macy's Day Parade were blown up in the street below his family's apartment. Starting in the 60s, Richard became interested in electronic music, along with a few others of our generation. I remember urging him to acquire a soldering iron. We were in a transition those days from thinking of composers as intellectuals who handled papers and pens to more hands-on, build-your-own-instruments kind of artists. Richard bought one of the very early Moog synthesizers, and one of its modules needed repair. One snowy January day, Richard and I drove to Trumansburg in upstate New York to visit Robert Moog. Moog had an artisanal shop there, where a few mature ladies were assembling his instruments. He was a warm and generous man. He quickly fixed Richard's module. We had a good time, stayed overnight nearby, and drove back to New York the next day. In the early 60s, Frederic Rzewski and Richard both got Fulbrights to Italy, and they met in Rome. Richard returned to Rome a few years later, bringing with him a Moog synthesizer. He was the first artist to appear in Europe with one of these futuristic devices. MEV started partly as a result of that. Richard, Frederic, and their comrades got concerts booked all over Europe. MEV, of course, has had a remarkable history that stretches all the way from the 1960s to the present. When you listen to Richard's recordings made over the decades, you can trace the explosive changes in music technology that our generation went through, changes much more radical than anything that had ever happened before. In his early recordings, you hear mostly Moog synths, the simple waveforms, elementary voltage control effects, and filtering. A little later, after lightweight battery-powered audio recorders became available, you start to hear natural sounds, particularly Richard's favorite early spring peepers. Then, in the late 70s, computer tech enters the picture. Richard developed his strong pieces for microcomputer-controlled acoustic pianos. And when you get into the 21st century, You hear all sorts of sounds mixed together, the borderline between electronics and acoustics almost erased. I could go on talking about Richard if there were more time. He was a close friend, the kind of friend who comes forward with help when help is needed. His absence leaves a vacuum.
Hi, I'm Miguel Frasconi. I was a student and a friend and a collaborator with Richard. I've known Richard pretty much all of my adult life. I met him in early 1974. I graduated high school early when I was 17 and started working on a Moog synth at a local university, teaching myself how to use the darn thing. My brother was going to York University and he was studying with Richard up there. And so I visited my brother at York, sat in on one of Richard's classes, and this world opened up. I'd been going to new music concerts and free jazz concerts in New York all my young teen years. But to actually have classes with someone who was right there in the middle of all these things of new music, of improvised music, of hybrid jazz music, was really profound. And Richard was so welcoming. The first time I saw Richard play was quite an awakening. What I remember most was the patch cords hanging around his neck and how quickly he would patch and repatch with the patch cords around his neck while he was playing the keyboard and patching and repatching. And I mean, at that point, I didn't think of Richard as a very fast moving person. He sort of moved along at a regular pace physically. But when he was playing this instrument, he became superhuman. It was just, his hands moved faster than I'd seen anyone's hands moved. Just anyway, so then I started studying I went to York and started studying with Richard in September of '74. And he was of course, very generous with his time. He introduced all of us, he introduced his students to people like Cornelius Cardew and David Tudor and Frederic Rzewski, and of course, Alvin Curran and Pauline Oliveros. And to have a personal connection with all these people who are now pretty much historic figures in new music was really quite profound and eye-opening. And he really, if there was one person that I could name who changed my life and directed me on the path that I have been on for the last 40 some odd years, it really would be Richard. One thing that doesn't seem to be well known is his influence on what's become the established Canadian music scene. There is a place in Toronto called the Music Gallery that's been around for over 40 years. That's now pretty much a Canadian institution. And the founders of the Music Gallery met in Richard's class in the mid-70s. I met someone who I then co-founded the group, the Glass Orchestra, in Richard's class. The Glass Orchestra was a group that played improvised music on all glass instruments, and I was in the group for about 10 years. But they are still going, and they play concerts every year, and they are an established experimental music ensemble in Canada. The last 10 or 15 years or so, I started teaching at Bard in 2009, and I became Richard's sort of music software whisperer. He was working on Ableton Live and building this instrument, and we would have multiple phone calls every week. And it was both a joy and a bane to try to teach him some of these things. I kept saying, well, what would you do if you were playing your Moog? but of course it wasn't a Moog. So, but I was very honored to be instrumental in this amazing Ableton instrument that he built on his laptop. And of course, I was super honored to be asked to play in his quartet at the Greenwich Music House in a year or so before he passed. Anyway, I'm going to I have been missing Richard a lot. I'm going to continue missing Richard a lot. It's actually very difficult for me to imagine a world without Richard Teitelbaum in it.
Well, that was extraordinary. Those extraordinary video statements. At this point, I'd like to introduce, well, just to say who's going to speak next, who is Hiroko Sakurazawa, Richard's wife, the pianist. And so we'll just introduce Hiroko.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Maybe I should say something before my video will be showed, maybe. But first of all, I'd like to express my great appreciation to Joan and Matt, who organized this wonderful event. And thanks to you, George, for being the host and the president of Bard College, Leon Botstein, for opening remarks, and to all who are presenting music, showing memories in remembrance of Richard with us today. Last few months, I was going through all stuff Richard left from his baby book to recent concert programs he played. I realized that his life was so rich and colorful, with many wonderful people like friends, colleagues, and students. And lastly, I'm so grateful to everyone who is watching this, thinking of Richard, his life, and his music. Thank you. And I think Matt will show the video. Thank you. Richard wrote this piece called Concertino for Piano and Orchestra for me, and I played in 2000 with Woodstock Chamber Orchestra at that time, conducted by the late Luis Garcia Renat, who was Richard's longtime colleague at Bard and sadly passed away in June this year too. So I thought it'd be very appropriate for me to present this piece. It has 3 movements and about 15 minutes long. The second movement has very little orchestra part. And I remember Richard said at one point it could be solo piano piece, although he never revised. So I took the liberty to take some parts of the movement, beginning, middle, and the end, and put them together. In fact, it became about 3 minutes solo piano piece. So today I'm going to play it in remembrance of Richard. And I also would like to mention that Bob Bilecki, another Richard's very trusted friend and colleague and wonderful sound engineer, is helping to record this piece. And for this occasion, with his son, Stephen, who is film producer, happened to be in this area from Los Angeles, where he lives. Thank you.
Wow. That was really beautiful. I never heard that before. Amazing. That's amazing. Oh. Thank you, Hiroko. We are running up against some fairly hard deadlines for going to the end of our presentation. So some things might be harder to do. So we may not hear any more media segments, but we would love to hear from Ursula Oppens, Ralph Samuelson, Garry Kvistad, Leila Bordreuil, I probably pronounced that incorrectly, sorry, Daniel Fishkin, Sergei Tcherepnin, and Dani Dobkin. So we can begin with Ursula.
Well, it's been a wonderful afternoon hearing this fabulous music all the time. I want to say I first met Richard when he was studying piano with my mother when he was in high school, but I didn't know him very well then. And then I met him again as part of Musica Elettronica Viva, and my mind was completely blown by hearing that music. And I was even a new music person at that time, but I had never heard such experimental, daring, innovative music that transcended everything. I just wanted to talk a tiny bit, and maybe you'll play 30 seconds of it, of the piano piece he wrote for me, Sec Transit Paramers, which to me was, I basically had more fun playing that than almost I've had doing anything else. He was able to have, it was for 3 pianos, 3 MIDI pianos, disclaviers, and he made wonderful controls. And in this piece, how I played a note
could change everything. And it was like the piano had been expanded 1,000-fold in what it could do. And it was just, I really wanted just to talk about what fun it was to play this instrument that Richard had invented. And I've played other pieces with electronics, and nothing ever was quite that human and humane. And if you just play 30 seconds of it, I'd be really happy.
We're doing it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Give me just 1 minute on the control.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for that, Ursula. That was amazing. So you just played one note and then all that other...
No, actually, I complained to him that he had written some really hard music for me, too. So
Yeah, I was kidding about that.
But still, it was absolutely amazing.
So thank you. And I'm echoing somehow. But Ralph Samuelson, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Hi. Well, it's certainly a great honor to be with you all to honor our dear friend Richard. Well, I first met Richard in 1969 at Wesleyan, a period that Barbara mentioned. And when we were graduate students together in what they called the World Music Program. And I was like a country bumpkin with a very narrow musical background. And there was this guy, Richard, and by the way, no one's mentioned his hair, but his hair was just great all through his life, right? There was Richard, and he just had such a broad palette of experience and knowledge in so many kinds of music. It blew me away. We became lifelong friends, and he was my friend and my teacher. He taught me so much about music. And not just music, but music thinking and life thinking. He was special. At that time, there were many musicians from different parts of the world teaching at Wesleyan. And Richard ate all of this up. I can see him to this day in the Javanese gamelan, way in the back, playing the big gong, waiting to the very end of the long musical phrase. He'd hit that gong. And then he could talk to you for hours about all the overtones that came out into his mind. He also loved shakuhachi, its music and its philosophy. Richard had this crazy idea that a few of you have referred to of bringing all of these musicians from around the world together to play together. And in this environment at Wesleyan, there was a lot of resistance to that. People thought it was crazy, or they were downright opposed to it. But what do you know? All of these people with a deep background in their own music tradition, never having engaged like this, they loved it. And Barbara, there was more than one concert. I remember 3. So we know there were at least 3. It was really brilliant and very far ahead of its time. I had the chance to play music with Richard many times, mostly with his piece Blends. I was a poor substitute for Katsuya Yokoyama, but I did my best. In any case, we know that Richard was a unique person, a unique musician, and such a good soul, and a long, long part of our lives. Now, there's a shakuhachi piece called Infinite Spirit, and I realized that this piece makes me think of Richard, not only in the title, Infinite Spirit, but in the rich simplicity of its music. It's a piece that's built up of only 4 pitches. And I won't play the whole piece, but I'm just going to play you the very opening. That's it. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to hear from Garry Kvistad. Well, I was one of the people who bought that Black Earth Percussion Group record in Chicago when I was living there.
Wow. Fantastic.
Said, who
Thank
are
you,
these
man.
people?
I think you bought one of the 5 copies that we actually pressed. That's great.
Not only that, but I still have it.
Well, thank you. I wrote a little something this morning I'd like to read and say good afternoon, since it still is afternoon, at least here in Woodstock, to everybody. This is a piece I call Contacta. When I think of Richard Teitelbaum, I think of connections. Richard connected people throughout the world. Am I being heard, George?
Yes.
Okay, great. I feel there was always only one degree of separation from Richard, even before I knew him. Our connections included a long list of people such as John Cage, Lou Harrison, Harry Parch, Henry Cowell, Steve Reich, Russell Hartenberger, Frederic Rzewski, Luigi Nono, Pauline Oliveros, Alvin Curran, Anthony Braxton, Toru Takamitsu, David Behrman, David Rosenboom, Barbara Mayfield, Richard Trithall, Robert Moog, Wendy Carlos, Don Buchla, Conlon Nancaro, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. And then there are institutions such as Bard College, York University, Wesleyan University, Cal Arts, the Creative Music Studio, MEV, Nexus, Black Earth Percussion Group, Bob Brown, Laura Kuhn, Mark Bernard, Source Magazine, Indonesian gamelans and other Asian musics, and of course, Woodstock, New York, to name a few. Despite Paul McCartney telling me not to drop names, these are all connections I had with Richard, whether I knew these people personally or not. The most recent wonderful connection is that of his wife, Hiroko, who's an amazing musician with a vast repertoire, as we just heard, of classical and modern music. Shortly after they were married, and as recently as earlier this year, Richard tried to connect us to perform Stockhausen's 1958 composition, Kontakte, which of course in German means contact or connection, This seminal work connects live percussion, which includes piano and quadraphonic pre-recorded electronic sounds. I had performed this work with composer pianist Richard Trithall in Carnegie Hall when we were both working with Lucas Foss and the Creative Music and the Creative Associates of Buffalo in 1971. Richard Teitelbaum was a big fan of Stockhausen's work, and Cantata was the equivalent of his Ninth Symphony. Richard's inspiring work with Mev was all about spontaneous connections and improvisation. Richard connected electronic elements and ideas. Richard was even ahead of the avant-garde in his use of improvisation. As we just heard, in 1970, he entered the PhD program at Wesleyan University, where he founded the World Band. By doing this, he connected many world cultures and did it with the universal language of improvisation. It was at Wesleyan where he met my good friend and colleague, percussionist Russell Hartenberger. Russell was interested in African music and wanted to study in Ghana. Richard told him that a good friend of his named Steve Reich had just returned from Ghana, where he studied the music of the Ewe people. So Russell met with Steve to learn more about his experience in Ghana. Steve was still developing his major work drumming at that time and invited Russell to join his group. Here again, Richard Teitelbaum connected these two people, and that connection spread to many others and continues to this present time. I joined Steve Reich and musicians in 1979 and later joined Nexus in 2002 with Russell Hartenberger, Bob Becker, and Bill Kahn. As a result of Richard Teitelbaum's special gift of putting people together, I personally attribute my involvement with these groups, at least in part, to Richard. Richard was a very bright person and served as a search engine for me before Alexa was born. If I needed to know anything about modern music, he would be the go-to. He wasn't shy to correct me as well, if needed. Like the time I confused Luigi Nono's Nonette with No-No Nanette. I kept running into Richard throughout the years at Steve Reich concerts, musical events here in the Hudson Valley, and social gatherings. One of the most notable events for me was his wedding with Hiroko here in the Catskills. It was a lovely gathering of my heroes of the 1960s avant-garde. Live dinner music was provided by a duo of Anthony Braxton and Pauline Oliveros at a small French inn, which possibly made it the most unique wedding reception dinner ever. Perhaps when we can gather for live performances again, Hiroko and I will perform Cantata in Richard's honor. It is quite ironic that our connection today is virtual. Thank you, Richard, for all your creative connections. We all love you and miss you. Here's a red wine toast of a great Italian red. If you have a drink in front of you, we'll toast him.
Yeah.
This is tuned to Harry Partch's 1/1, the unity note, and soon it'll be a different note. And one last toast is a Javanese gong toast to Richard. Listen to the overtones. Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Garry. Thank you. I would like to introduce two final groups of people. One, we wanted to hear from Bob Gluck, who was very helpful to Hiroko at a very difficult time, and also we co-wrote the obituary, and was another longtime associate of Richard. So, Bob, if you're there, could you say a few words?
Thank you, George. Can I be heard? Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I had some musical associations with Richard. Just to note, Ursula, when I was performing that same piece he wrote for you for the multiple disc claviers, trying to play all the ridiculous score, I said to him, "Enough of this. I don't want to do it." And he said, "Fine, just ignore all the notes." And I've had the great opportunity to write about Richard and to interview Richard, but that's not really how I know him. It rather came through mutual friends who were living in Woodstock, not far from Richard. And once again, Ursula, this may resonate with you. Richard's childhood rabbi, Ira Eisenstein, and his musicologist wife, Judith Kaplan Eisenstein, were mutual friends of ours. And Judith kept calling me, and I guess kept calling Richard and saying, you know, you two of you should know each other. You're both Jews, you're into Jewish things, and you're both electronic music composers. And I said, leave me alone, you know, stop nagging me. And finally, they convinced us to show up. And that was about 30 years ago. And Richard, ever since, had been one of my dearest friends that I ever made in my entire life, with whom there was really nothing we didn't talk about. I also do want to acknowledge that just Hiroko's incredibly heroic. I think that's not even, doesn't even quite touch it. Efforts in supporting Richard during his illness and his last period, just so far beyond anything I could imagine anybody doing. One last thing that I wanted to say is that while Richard is, you know, so well known for his technological engagements and all, I thought of him as actually one of the least technological people that I've ever met. He had a hard time figuring things out, as was mentioned before. He was super internal, so that you couldn't tell that he was thinking so many thoughts all the time because it was so slow and, you know, internal. And being patient with Richard drove me completely crazy. And it truly took a village to raise Richard. But it was always worth it. And he was always so smart, so self-effacing, so patient, and so loving, even if he didn't always know how to show it. And just the world's such a better place that Richard's been in it.
Thanks, Bob. I think the first part of our presentation, because it's getting on to, like, we've been here almost 3 hours. So, you know, everybody has incredible stamina, but I think I'd like to consider hearing from two different groups of people. One is some brief reminiscences from the four people we mentioned who are alumni of Bard who worked with Richard. And then if people from the family would like to comment, we'll start with Bard.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. So I'll run, Daniel's edited together a video of remembrances from 4 alumni who studied with Richard across about a 15-year period. So I'll play that from my computer, and then it'd be lovely to open things up to the family after.
Okay.
I had no idea what I was.
My name is Daniel Fishkin, and I went to Bard in 2004, and I graduated in 2009. I'm now in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm in the middle of my PhD studying computer music and music composition. And I'm going to talk to you now about Richard Teitelbaum.
Hey, my name is Dani Dobkin. I was at Bard from 2010 to 2014, where I studied electronic composition with Richard. And I'm currently in New York as a doctoral candidate in music composition at Columbia University.
Hi, my name is Sergei Tcherepnin, and I went to Bard from 1999 to 2003, where I took many colorful classes with Richard. I'm in Brooklyn right now, where I'm making music mostly.
Hi, my name is Leila Bordreuil.
I am a cellist, a composer, and sound artist. Went to Bard from 2008 to 2012, where I studied with Richard a lot. And I'm here to talk to you about Richard Teitelbaum. When Richard died, I tried to find some pictures. Obviously, the only two pictures I found were just me and him in this really ridiculous, like, silver costume on the beach in Florida. And then this other picture that was just like us in front of some weird spaceship, like waving in a weird way. And that's the only pictures I have. They're really, really goofy. So was Richard, you know, he's a very goofy guy for sure. The pictures are from a residency that I did in Florida at the Atlantic Center for the Arts, where he was a master artist in residence. And yeah, we like went to the beach every day. Yeah, it was really great, and it was my first residency ever. I was like 21 years old at the time, and I think looking back on it, the fact that Richard invited me to go to Florida had like a really big impact on like the rest of my life as an artist, because then I was like, oh, I can do this if I work for it, you know. And
after I graduated, I ended up going to stay at his house for a few months and finishing my orchestra piece and trying to look for bears outside his window, and occasionally helping him organize like old recordings and things like that, and talking about Henry Cowell. But yeah, somehow it's interesting that you say that he sort of like made that impact on your sort of like trajectory, I guess, because similarly, I didn't really think about it until when I was thinking about this now. Is like, oh yeah, Richard's the reason I went to Bard when I was 17. You know?
I went to Bard. I thought I wanted to be a writer, and then I signed up for this this class that he teaches called John Cage and His World. And I was so excited for this because I was a total Cage freak in high school, and I didn't know you could go to college and like take a whole class on John Cage. And it was like a third-year class, but I'd kind of talked my way in, and I made a big deal out of impressing Richard. Like, no, you got to let me in this class. I'm obsessed with silence. I read it at my high school coffee shop, you know. He had this very funny way of being serious and light at the same time. Like, I don't think he really cared at all whether students did their homework, because I don't think he liked telling people what to do. But if you said something that he thought was incorrect about John Cage, or if you did a piece that was somehow like a perversion of Cage's ideas, he would give you such a hard time. And we went to like Maverick Concert Hall and performed 433 in the same place where Tudor premiered it. And, you know, that was like really special.
I went in thinking I'd be like poli-sci or something. And I remember like sitting in the classroom and I was like, what's that? And I pointed to the Surge, and Miguel was like, that's the Surge. Like, you should see Richard Teitelbaum play it. And I was like, whoa, he's a real wizard on that machine. And that kind of like opened up this whole world of like, because I had no idea what like electronic or experimental music was. Like when I entered Bard, like, yeah, I listened to like indie music, I listened to rock music, but it kind of like opened the door to like the great beyond of, you know, what else is out there.
But it's true, like Daniel, you said about how he didn't like to tell people what to do, and I feel like that's like so true. Like everything was so understated in a way. But that sort of understatedness, I feel like I also really value on a human level, but also as a student and now as a teacher, letting the students do what they want to do in a way, but to, you know, always kind of demand this respect, maybe demand's the wrong word, but have the utmost respect for the avant-garde. And I feel like that's because it's a different time now.
Richard didn't teach to everyone. He taught to those who were really interested in the avant-garde.
Well, it's just amazing though to think too that we were, I was taking, world music with this pioneer who was in Musica Electronica Viva.
Yeah.
And, you never talked about it, but I would listen to those recordings and just be so just blown away, in a way at the time. I wouldn't really talk about it with him, but I was just like, wow, he's why doesn't he talk about all of this?
Why doesn't he talk? Why didn't he talk about his music? It was a real mystery.
He never talked about it.
And also, the only time he really talked about it with me was when I was taking a Jewish mysticism class at Bard, and I was writing my final paper on Sabbatai Tzvi, False Messiah.
Yeah.
And he had done an opera on Sabbatai Tzvi, so we would just talk for hours about. I gave him my paper, and we talked all about it.
I didn't hear his piece Blends until I listened to that the day that he died, and I heard Blends, this amazing Shakuhachi album with electronics, and then I hear this howling of like a wolf, and it made me remember, I did a recording with him, and it was some stupid little text score that I wrote back in 2005, and there's a wolves section, and Richard is playing piano, and he just starts howling. But he's never going to say, if you want to hear me howling, listen to Blends. It was like a secret, a 15-year secret, that I would find this later. And I find that really, I wished he would talk more about that stuff. But it's also a special little secret for the future.
He was kind of a bit of this legendary mystery in some way. Other students would be like, Richard is a legend in the history of electronic music, but you didn't really know what made that the case, because he really didn't talk about it.
Right.
Didn't have that air, and it was interesting too when he died, and then there were all these articles about them in the French newspaper as well. They were just painting this really grandiose portrait as him being a pillar in the evolution of electronic music, which was interesting to me because he was just so humble in a way that those are just things I wouldn't think about when I thought about him, because there's he didn't need that to be relevant or be he didn't need to let you know that he's a part of history to be your friend.
Yeah.
At some point, I became conscious of the fact that he also would improvise on piano, or he just started playing the piano and improvising. I was like, oh yeah, I improvise on piano too. And all through college, that was the main thing I loved to do. And so I was like, what? And then I was just like, that sounds so crazy. That just sounds crazy. What are you doing? What kind of system is this? And now all of these things are coming together, and I'm realizing as we're talking that he just had this way about him, his sort of anarchic way of teaching or something.
Yeah.
Which also goes with his sort of anarchic way of doing music too, which isn't to say he didn't respect composition. It's, and he really did. But then also the way he treated improvisation was just sort of treating everything as, anything that's happening right now is the most important thing.
I did a lot of random odd jobs for Richard. I would periodically go to storage units with him and move boxes around. I was always so amazed when I was doing these jobs with him. It's he never threw out his students' compositions. So he had boxes and boxes of reel-to-reels.
What?
Many. Yeah, it was really, really precious. And I was like, why don't you throw that crap out? These are midterm composition projects from the 80s or whatever. And he's just like, I can't throw them out. They're real pieces of music. I just that level of commitment to his students really stuck with me. He really took his pedagogy seriously, even despite it being so understated. Yeah, he cared about his students too as people.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's
It
amazing.
is sort of surprising in a way, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just sad that Richard's gone. But actually talking about him with you guys is making me feel sad.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of his sort of suggestions and all of his ideas were always really compositional, actually, and really always about trying to get you out of this kind of like pattern that might, that's sort of like this easy human tendency pattern, that I think was like a big thing of trying to break these kinds of like muscle memory patterns in improvising, but then in composition to like break these kind of, get yourself out of these boxes.
My fondest memory of Richard, like sitting in the classroom, and he was, I asked him to critique one of my pieces, and like kind of like a little studio visit, and I played my piece for him, and halfway through the piece, the fire alarm went off, and he was just sitting there like, and I was like, Richard, that's the fire alarm. We should probably head out of here. And he's like, oh, okay. And then just like stood up, covered his ears, and I left. But it was, he enjoyed the sound, whatever was kind of thrown like that.
Thank you very much. I wanted to, I'm having this strange moment here on, there's some tuba playing. No, that's gone now. I thought it was Richard, but it turned out to be a tuba. I couldn't even tell. We are at the stage where I would like to call on members of the family before we bring this celebration of Richard to a close. I mean, we're all pretty, many of us have come out of the tradition of minimalism, so we can really have iron butts and we can really spend a long time listening to one little note. But we've heard some extraordinary stuff tonight, but, oh, Charles, you're laughing. But I think if we could, if people wouldn't mind, we've heard from extraordinary people, and I think they've expressed maybe what a lot of us feel in our hearts about Richard. So if that's okay. I think someone is saying if there are others who would like to stay on and catch up, I would be happy to pass the host to others after we wrap. Matt, you can do that. I have no idea what that means.
That was
I'm
from
not
me,
very good at that kind of thing.
So if there's some people who are on the call who'd like to just speak similar to after an event, I could deem someone the host when we formally close and kind of hand over the keys to lock up after we're done, and that would be just fine.
Okay, that sounds great. So I think Ben and Sarah said they wanted to chat, wanted to talk. We could start there.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm Richard's nephew, Ben Teitelbaum, calling in from Oakland, California today. Richard was an affectionate, warm uncle, always there for me. I think one of my earliest memories of him as a child was just running around in his house, trying out all the different instruments he had. He had a lot of very strange instruments, many wind instruments and percussion instruments, and that he was, he would encourage my curiosity as a small child to see what noises they make. We remain, Richard was, that if you know the Teitelbaums, were not the closest family, but Richard was always present at our family Passovers, and that was sort of my regular annual fix with Richard when I was growing up and beyond. We would also then catch up a couple times a year by phone. And he was a connection to Judaism. He was very, not religious, but respectful of traditions and fascinated by Jewish mysticism. I think it was first from him that I heard of the Golem and of Sabbatai, which turned both of those into music, as we know. And I was just surprised how much just through my life I keep running into people who for whom Richard has made a real impact. I'm not a musician, but I lived with some new music people in Seattle after college. I sent a memory from Leslie Dalaba, the trumpeter, to the chat about the kind of the impression that Richard and George had made on her early on in her career. In Oakland, have a neighbor, Richard Freeman, who was very involved in the Other Minds Festival and radio program on KLW here. He was big fan of Richard, and it was when I was at MIT. Richard, I think, was a guest at the Media Lab by musician residence Todd Mackover, and I spent a whole kind of a week. He spent a week or two in Cambridge, and we connected a lot there. He welcomed us into our home with our small children, and we joined high holiday services in Woodstock a few times outdoors under those big tents. And when he died, I shared a memory on Twitter of having gone to I think probably the last concert that Steve Lacy gave, and with Hiroko and Richard, and we went backstage, and Richard learned that Steve was dying, and they said their goodbyes, and he was very, very stunned, and we piled into one of those pedicabs with Hiroko on Richard's lap, and it was pouring rain, and we went for a long ride through New York after midnight in the rain in the pedicab with Richard sort of digesting mortality, and I'm going to miss him a lot, and I was surprised how many people came out and reacted to that tweet that people I know from completely other circles, university IT circles and so forth, who were big fans of his music. So he was really a warm and beautiful soul, and I'm going to miss him as an uncle and as a person, and I'm so grateful for all the memories that you all have shared, and the music that has been made here. Thank you.
Thanks. I see in the center of my screen is Tim Teitelbaum.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Richard's kid brother, Tim. And I want to thank you all on behalf of our whole family for teaching us a lot about our Richard. And to make a connection in the spirit of Garry, thank you, Hiroko, for performing Richard's piece on what I recognize as the old family piano, around which we as children would gather around as my father played, and we would sing such formative songs as On Top of Old Smoky. So I thought to contribute some stories from Richard's childhood and family life that bear on his career as a musician, that I thought you might enjoy. And I thought to call these three stories Opportunity, Different Worlds, and Nevertheless He Persisted. The stories involve three towering and influential figures in Richard's life and of the 20th century, Stravinsky, Bartók, and Groucho Marx. First, Opportunity. When Richard was very young, we lived on West 86th Street, across the hall from the mother of a very famous theatrical lawyer who lived elsewhere, and she was her son's entertainer-in-chief. And on the occasion of his client Stravinsky's birthday, a grand celebration was held. And Richard was brought across the hall to the party and placed upon Stravinsky's knee. This is Richard, Stravinsky was told, and you are his favorite composer. And Stravinsky said, "And tell me, Richard, which of my pieces is your favorite piece?" And Richard, petrified, managed to get out The Rustle of Spring, to which a startled Stravinsky replied, "I don't believe I wrote that piece." My second story I called Different Worlds. When Richard was a teenager, we moved to West 77th Street, the very apartment that David Behrman mentioned, where we used to help the men from Goodyear blow up the Macy's parade, Thanksgiving parade. The recording world was switching from 78s to 33s. And as a housewarming gift, someone gave us a hi-fi that could play LPs. And the evening after the system was installed, a friend of Richard's came to dinner and brought my parents as a gift a recording of the Bartók Violin Concerto No. 2, our very first record. As we gather around to listen to the wonders of a hi-fi playing an LP on stereo, my father, who Richard always liked to describe as an 18th century man with a few daring touches of the 19th century, exclaimed on hearing the Bartók, "Richard, I think the system is broken." So that was one of the obstacles my brother had to overcome, I think. And third story, nevertheless, he persisted. Years later, when Richard was already well established as a musician, my father, a Wall Street attorney who had never given up hope that Richard would himself become a lawyer, continued to tell Richard that music was a fine avocation, but surely not a profession. I thought you might all enjoy knowing that Richard was fed that. On one visit by Richard to our father's law office, my father gestured to his wall of bound briefs and stated, "Well, Richard, these are the books that I have written." And Richard subsequently told me that all he could think of at the time was the classic contract scene from the Marx Brothers, A Night at the Opera, when Groucho reads, "The party of the first part shall be known in this contract as the party of the first part." How do you like that? That's pretty neat, hey? So in short, we're all very glad that Richard persisted and lived out his days as a professional musician. We certainly miss him. And now it occurred to me, I want to tell you one more story, if you'll indulge me. And this is not from his childhood, but one that I always enjoyed from your world. I don't know how widely this story was shared among you. Maybe we call this story Building Bridges. When Richard was doing his solo piece for 3 pianos with the aid of a Motorola 68,000 and I guess 2 wheel-up Marantz piano forzetzers and their 88 electromagnetic fingers, he had a chance to open for the Modern Jazz Quartet in the Berlin Philharmonic Hall. And Richard thought the pairing with the MJQ was odd, and he went on with the show with some trepidation and some concern that the MJQ audience might not dig his music. But well into the piece, the audience went wild and started to hoot and holler, spurring Richard on to ever greater pyrotechnics. When Richard finished and strode triumphantly into the wings, his engineer said, "But why didn't you stop?" And Richard said, "Stop? Why should I have stopped? They were loving it." And the engineer said, "Because your solenoids were on fire." So that's those are my memories of Richard and music. Thank you.
I was the engineer, and you got that right.
Wait, who was the engineer?
Me, I'm Mark. I was there.
Where are you, Mark? Okay, I'd love to catch up with you. Did I get the story right?
Pretty close. Hiroko had actually relayed your version of it to me, and yeah, so it's close enough. But
please,
he was basically layering so much stuff over and over. All the keys were held down on the other pianos, so he thought, "Well, it's not very loud, so I'm going to put more layers in." And you know, these things weren't designed to, these electronic solenoid were not designed to hold keys down for many minutes, and they started smoking. And so as soon as he was about to take an encore, we ran up and like started pulling these apart, and he was like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "People love it." He didn't get it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Do we have other family members who would like to present? Okay, so what I would like to do is Joan Tower, who was instrumental in organizing this, would like to say a few closing remarks.
Hi, everybody. This has been such an amazing celebration party, and I know that you're also interested in each other. It's like you're a big family, and you're very closely knit. And I've learned so much more about Richard than I knew when he was alive. It's been just very heartwarming. I have one funny story to tell about Richard. I learned early on, you never asked him how he was, because he would say, "Oh, I have a cold, and I have to go to the hospital, like right now." "Oh, well, it's just a cold, Richard." No. It may be pneumonia, which could be tuberculosis. I mean, it could get really bad. "But Richard, why don't you just go home and get a nap and some soup or something?" No, I have to go to the hospital now. So after that, I never asked him how he was. So there are many funny stories that some of you have told about Richard, and we loved him, and we're going to miss him. And thank you, Matt, so much for everything you've done. This is amazing. He put this whole technological thing in. And George, it's beyond midnight. He's in Berlin now, and he stayed up for this beyond midnight. I think we lost Alvin and the others who are in Europe.
No, Alvin's here.
Oh, Alvin's here. Alvin's here. Okay, thank you, Alvin, for.
We got Phil Mitten. We got I don't know where Jerry Hemingway is. He might be in Europe too. We got a lot of people.
And I apologize for all the others that we missed, but we just have to stop now. Okay, so thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Well, I'm going to sign off, but